Welcome, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started as a courtesy to those who are still in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being part of our community. We have some great content for you today, but first, a few reminders. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the small box right below where you enter your question. We've had a large number of people register for this webinar. We're thrilled to see such interest, but it means it may be impossible for us to respond to the large volume of questions in real time. We will do our best to get as many as we can, and we have several dedicated people standing by just to answer questions, but I wanted to provide an additional mechanism to ensure everyone's questions get answered. If you'll visit aka.ms/AIPQ&A, you'll see a post dedicated to webinar questions. We'll be reviewing the question transcript after this webinar, and we'll post further questions there. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to post a question there. So please feel free to do that, and we'll reply and with any questions you have. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/AIP-recordings. If for some reason you don't have the rest of the series, you can find it at aka.ms/AIP-webinar. While you're there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security-community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs, get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them, so we hope you'll join us. We have some exciting content for you today. This is part one of a 6-part webinar series on Azure Information Protection, or AIP for short. Throughout the series, we'll be walking you through all the major aspects of functionality, showing you how to deploy and configure each part. Today's focus will be on introducing AIP and covering some of the latest developments. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Kevin McInerney. He's one of our AIP experts. He's a senior program manager on our AIP team and part of what we call our Get to Production group. The focus of his role is to help our customers deploy and configure AIP, so he's in a great position to help you on this topic. So with that, I'll hand it over to him. Kevin?
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, everyone. As Ryan mentioned, this is the first part in the AIP webinar series. We are doing an introduction to Microsoft Information Protection. I am Kevin McInerney. Here's my Twitter handle at KMcKinnMSFT. I'm Senior Program Manager on the Customer Experience Engineering team, or CXE for short. We are the customer-facing part of the AIP product group. We are a small team with about 10 members globally. Our role is to help our largest enterprise customers deploy AIP. This role is a twofold role. We provide guidance and best practice insights in helping our customers deploy faster and avoid common pitfalls. But just as importantly, we listen. We listen about their deployment experience, we listen about gaps in the product today, and we listen about features that the customers wish we had. We then take this feedback to the development team, and this helps us shape the direction of Azure Information Protection. Today's session is the first in a number of webinars we have planned over the next few weeks. There are topics we don't drill down into today because we have more of these sessions coming up, and we don't want to steal too much of their thunder. As you can see, we're running 2 sessions for each topic. We have sessions in the European time zone and in the North American time zone. We're also doing a number of webinars for Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS. If that's a technology you're interested in, please make sure to check those out as well. In this session, we're covering an introduction to information protection. We're going to talk about the difference between Azure Information Protection and Microsoft Information Protection. We'll cover some AIP basics. We'll discuss unified labeling and technology convergence. We'll take a look at Office 365 Pro Plus integration, or native integration. We'll show the secure email functionality using Office message encryption. We're going to introduce AIP and MCAS integration. We will discuss our AIP analytics, which is our built-in reporting capabilities. We'll talk about the SDK and third-party integrations like Adobe PDF, and then finally some tips on how to get started with information protection. So what do we mean by information protection? Let's level set. This can mean many different things depending upon how you look at it. These can be as simple as a Kensington lock on your laptop, encrypting your data at the physical level with things like BitLocker, or rights management and turning off controls within applications. What we mean when we say information protection is helping you to protect sensitive data all the way throughout its lifecycle, both inside and outside of your organization. And when we say data, what we're talking about is unstructured user data. Things like email, the different document types, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, or whatever other types of documents you have. We're interested in what you as a person sitting in front of the keyboard is working with. This is where our focus on this team is. So how do we help you understand what you've got, where it is, who's got access, and what are they allowed to do with it, even if the data leaves your organization? So for the content of this session, that is what we mean. So before we go on, let's hopefully remove any confusion about what we mean by MIP, or Microsoft Information Protection. Most of our customers have heard about AIP already, or Azure Information Protection, but Microsoft Information Protection is a framework to provide a consistent set of information protection capabilities across multiple products. So this is across the Microsoft platform and also extending this across our partner products that choose to support the capability. It isn't a subscription or a product that you can buy, it is a framework. So we don't normally talk about licensing in these presentations because, well, it's licensing and we'd rather talk about technology. But with the convergence and unification of the technology, it's important to note a few things. You don't have to relabel or reprotect anything you've already done with AIP. It is the same engine under the hood. If you only configure sensitivity labels in the Security and Compliance Center, for instance, never deploy the add-in, and you classify and protect Office documents only, once we release native integrations into Office, you will be able to perform these under the M365 E3 license. Anything beyond that will require AIP P1 for manual classification and AIP P2 for automation. These are typically sold with M365 or EMS E3 and E5 respectively. Now, there may be a few things that I've mentioned in here that are that you may not be familiar with, but by the end of this session, you should understand what these are. And if you want to go back and rewatch this, you can look at these again. So let's start with some AIP basics. Since this is an introduction session, and some of you may have never seen this before, we're going to take a few minutes and just look at what AIP is. So today, AIP is basically a .NET add-in for Office. We have the AIP toolbar across the top of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, and the Protect button in the ribbon, which, as you can see on the right, provides the same labels in a drop-down list where you can click on it. Here we have the concept of parent labels or top-level labels and sub-labels. As you see in the screenshot, confidential and highly confidential have a little black triangle next to them, and this indicates that the labels have sub-labels. Typically, these sublabels tend to be used when we're talking about protection and we want to handle the content differently. So today we configure these AIP labels in the AIP blade within the Azure portal. We're in the process of moving this label management of AIP to the Security and Compliance Center, and we will talk a bit more about that later. Here you can see my list of labels and a nice indicator of whether they include visual markings, such as headers, footers, watermarks, or if they are configured to apply protection. We can edit a label and configure its specific properties here, such as visual markings, automatic conditions that will be matched on the label, such as if 3 credit card numbers are in a document or email, we automatically set it to highly confidential, all employees. So to be seen and used by our users, though, labels need to be added to a policy. The global policy is the default policy, and it's pre-created with all AIP subscriptions. The labels that are in this policy are automatically visible to everyone in the organization using AIP. We also have the concept of scoped files. These allow us to provide a specific label to a specific group of people. So scope policies will only show the labels that are assigned there to that specific group of users. And if the label has protection, only the users and groups configured to have access can open and work on those documents. Scope policies tend to be used for departments like HR, legal, or mergers and acquisitions and special projects. So what exactly happens when we classify a document? Basically, we write metadata into the document. You can see this in the Office documents by viewing the advanced properties. Even if the file is protected, encrypted in this case, the metadata is still in clear text, meaning that we can use DLP or CASB solutions to make decisions based upon the label. So that explains the basic mechanics. Now we're going to look at what we're trying to solve with this. In the past, the firewall was always the security perimeter. We had all of our users, devices, apps, and data all happy inside of our on-premises private cloud. So we never had to worry about anybody stealing our data outside of that. Now there's fewer boundaries and a whole bunch more data and more complexity. Users want to work at home, on the train, in the hotel, and across multiple devices like laptops, tablets, and phones. With the relative ease of signing up for new SaaS applications, whether you as an organization are prepared for this or not, your data is traveling. So this is our vision slide. Everything that we've been working on aligns to this slide in some way. This shows our 4 pillars of information protection, which are discover, classify, protect, and monitor. And we'll be going through all of those in this webinar series. And we use these across devices, applications, cloud services, and on-premises. This is the vision of Microsoft Information Protection and how we want to help you protect your information. So next, let's talk a little bit about convergence. So the way Microsoft Information Protection was, or currently is in some aspects, is we have Office 365 Information Protection, Windows Information Protection, and Azure Information Protection. That's a bunch of information protections, but O365 Information Protection was used for preserving and remediating emails and documents in Office 365 applications and services using the O365 Security Console. Windows Information Protection protects files and documents on Windows clients and devices, and is configured using the Intune portal. And Azure Information Protection classifies and protects emails and documents using Office clients, third-party applications and services, and on-premises, and using the AIP blade in the Azure portal. So going forward, we are working towards consolidating and converging these so that we have consistent detection and classification to protect and preserve sensitive data across Office 365 applications and services, Windows clients and desktops, mobile, on-premises, and third-party apps and services using the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center. Makes sense, right? So moving the AIP labels to SCC, this also includes moving where the policies are stored. We are making Windows Information Protection label aware so that whenever a document with a specific classification is found on a system, it can be automatically set to work data so that that document can be protected using Windows Information Protection. And we're using AIP as the classification, labeling, and protection technology across the platform for consistency. So this is a journey. We're not going to get there in one release, but recognize that today this is very complicated. You know, as an administrator, you have capabilities, but it can be a bit confusing where you should configure some of this functionality. These are just the capabilities that we have inside of Microsoft or have in the past been using inside of Microsoft. But as we standardize within this platform, the aim is to make this simpler and enable you to be more effective in managing information protection. So this is Microsoft Information Protection on a page. We're not going to go into all of these today, but this is a simple summary of the main MIP integration points today. We'll touch on a couple of these conditions towards the end of the session, but we'd like to call out conditional access now, as some of our customers didn't realize that AIP is one of the applications supported by conditional access. Here we can configure any of our standard options with CA to access protected content for your users. This can be MFA, ensuring that it's on a managed device, and other options available through CA. Today, this applies to all protected content, regardless of label, but we're currently in planning to expand this to per label conditional access, so this will become a lot more granular. So here's our scary picture from one of the earlier slides, but now we're going to start mapping some products against it to understand what controls we have to help us in these various scenarios. So we have the AIP scanner, which allows you to scan your on-premises data stores and SharePoint repositories. We have the Office apps and Windows Information Protection to protect your devices. And in the cloud, we have Office 365 and Microsoft Cloud App Security. Using these, you can discover and classify your sensitive information, no matter where it's created, modified, or shared. So now let's take a look at the sensitivity labels in the Security and Compliance Center. As we mentioned earlier, we're in the process of moving the AIP label management to the Security and Compliance Center. Here we can see the same labels that we saw in the AIP portal earlier. We've migrated the labels in the test tenant, and if you're using AIP today, using the Office add-in, then you can do that same migration as well. This copies your labels from the AIP portal to the SCC and includes the label's unique identifier. This way, we ensure you have consistent labels in both the Azure portal and the Security and Compliance Center. Any of our new capabilities will look to the Security and Compliance Center for labels and configurations. This will include Office for Mac, Android, iOS, Adobe, and other third-party integrations. We've also just released an AIP client for Windows that looks here for labels and configuration also. This is currently in preview and is called the AIP client for unified labeling. Now we're going to take a look at Office 365 Pro Plus integration, or native integration. A big move this year is we'll see some of the initial releases of AIP going native within Office. This is in Office Pro Plus, aka the subscription or click to run, and won't be available in Office 2019 and downstream Office clients in its native form. This functionality will be released in steps, and the first step is going to be supporting manual classification. The advantage of going native is that it has built-in and not bolted on, so we get deeper integration with the products and better performance. We can leverage the fact that Office is cross-platform, and staying current will be handled as part of the standard Office update cycles. This is how we will help the users with that consistent experience. Currently, the Office applications for Mac have this native functionality built in as of the GA version 16.21 and above. I believe the current public version is 16.22, but 16.21 and above should have this capability available once your labels are in SCC and published to your users. This is a view of what the labels look like in Outlook for Mac. Very similar to Word, but using the email interface. You can also see that the labels display in the preview pane at the top of the messages within Outlook. So this is an image of the sensitivity labeling looks like in Word for iOS. This is currently in GA, and if you have your SCC labels published, then your users can start seeing these sensitivity labels on their iOS devices. Similarly, you can see that the experience is the same for Word on Android, and Word, Excel, and PowerPoint on Android and iOS are all GA at this time. So this is a screenshot showing the AIP add-on for unified labeling. So not every customer is on Pro Plus today, and initially we won't have feature parity between native and the add-on. So the AIP unified labeling client preview, because this is Windows only, we will have the toolbar available. Although this looks very similar to the current AIP add-in, this is a rewrite from the ground up, so we are expecting to iron out a few bugs in the first few releases. And as mentioned before, this is currently in preview, so feel free to kick the tires, and let us know if you find anything that isn't functioning properly. Next, let's talk real quick about the Office 365 message encryption. So O365 message encryption allows users to easily send protected messages to any user with an email address. This is a secure email solution that supports Office 365 accounts, federated identities such as Yahoo, Google, and Microsoft accounts, and one-time passcode for any other email. Here we can see an OMI message received in Gmail. These messages can be personalized to use your corporate branding to make recipients feel more confident when clicking on the button to read the message. Because this was received within email and they've already logged in, they can click on Read the Secure Message, and it will automatically take them to the OMI portal using the Gmail authentication token they already had, and open up the email message, and they can even view documents that were attached to that message directly within the OMI portal. They also have the capability of adding additional documents and being able to collaborate securely back and forth from within that OMI portal experience. So we announced at Ignite last year that we're also starting to add some reporting on OME usage within the organization. This is currently in preview, but should be going GA later this year. So now let's talk briefly about Microsoft Cloud App Security integration. Microsoft Cloud App Security allows you to protect your software solution applications, such as O365 and Box and Salesforce. And we have AIP integration within MCAS at this time. So we won't dive too deep into this because we have our MCAS webinar series if you're interested in learning more. However, you can use Microsoft Cloud App Security to be able to search through files in the cloud services and be able to apply classification labels based upon sensitive information you find in there. Or you can even have it apply a classification label on download so that you can have all the native experience that you have within SharePoint Online or Box. And then when that file is downloaded to a device, or if it is, you can ensure that it is locked down and not able to be abused. You can also block download on unmanaged devices and things of that nature, but more information is available through our MCAS webinar series. Here we can see that these confidential documents were found, and you can see the V2 there, that box is showing. That's because it was found by MCAS and updated with protection so that these are now fully encrypted. If you look within the MCAS control policies, you can actually see that this document has been identified by a specific policy and protected. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the AIP analytics, or our native reporting. This will come up as part of our monitoring session on April 9th in EU and April 11th in North America. So we're only going to touch on this briefly today. So this is our fourth pillar of information protection, and it is to view reports and assess classified, labeled, and protected data. This is a screenshot showing some of our usage reporting. So you can actually see exactly how many items have been labeled, how they have been labeled, and by what applications they've been labeled. You can also see the activity in a more granular fashion. So you can see exactly what items have been protected or what items have been labeled in specific ways, such as general, confidential, or highly confidential. And when you click on these items in the activity logs preview, you can actually see additional information. And if you have WDATP integration, you can even see device risk directly from the activity logs portal. So let's touch a little bit on the SDK. We will also have an additional webinar session on this on April 16th in Europe and on April 18th in North America. But everything we've built under the Microsoft Information Protection banner internally is built on the SDK. We provide this for our independent software vendor partners, but also our customers to work with as well. You can extend labeling protection with the MIP SDK to drive consistent experience for information protection with cross-platform simplified SDK. This broadens the reach of information protection capabilities. You can extend classification, labeling, and protection capabilities on other apps and services, and it is compatible with Microsoft Information Protection Solutions and Active Directory RMS. For additional information here, you can go to aka.ms/MIP SDK. But we will also have the webinar later on next month for more information on that. We also have native support for PDF files on the Adobe Acrobat Reader. Adobe Acrobat will be able to understand and honor labels and protection. It can view protected files natively in Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Acrobat Reader on Windows. This labeling experience will be built in natively to Acrobat, so that is coming later this year. Integration is enabled by the Microsoft Information Protection SDK. This is already GA'd for the Adobe Acrobat Reader and Adobe Acrobat, but only for consumption. The actual protection is going to come later, and we can't give specific timelines because Adobe is going to be handling that. So getting started. We have a session on March 26th in the EU and March 28th in North America, where we'll discuss best practices for your label taxonomy. In the next few slides, we're going to summarize some of our getting started points. So one of the best ways to get started is we've published a document sharing our best practices for deploying and managing AIP. We call this the Azure Information Protection Deployment Acceleration Guide, and it is available at aka.ms/AIPDAG. This was written by our team and released a couple of weeks ago. This is a 1 to 200 level overview of more of the business aspects of deploying Azure Information Protection. While it does have links to the technical resources to be able to go to the documentation sites to find out information, this is more about the process of deploying Azure Information Protection. And this walks you through a lot of the, an overview of a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in the sessions that we're having in these webinars. So we highly advise that you download this, read through it, and it will give you a preview into what you can learn by coming to our future sessions, but it will also help you get started on your deployment. So some of the things that we recommend when getting started is you want to define sensitive data for your company and establish a labeling taxonomy. That acceleration guide can help you with that process. You want to customize your protection policies based on internal objectives and compliance requirements. You want to start classifying and labeling content in a POC and actually get people using it so that you know how they're able to receive it. And then, of course, assess and adjust based on ongoing monitoring of sensitive data and the impact to your users. Here we have some resources, and we will be making these resources available through this deck in the security community. And thank you for joining us. We'll now be going to some Q&A and answering some of the questions.
Fantastic, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to read some of these here so you can speak to them as we have other ones being addressed through IM. So do we have AIP protection on Adobe on Mac?
So AIP protection for Adobe on Mac is currently in development with Adobe. They are actively developing that, and we are hoping to see a preview sometime in the near future. But again, we don't have control of those timelines. So as soon as something is available for preview, we will blog about it. So please definitely keep up with ak.ms/AIP blog, and you will be seeing that as soon as it is available for preview. We will be putting that information out.
Great, thank you. For people doing legal searches, will AIP documents show up in the results?
It depends upon how you're doing those searches. If you're using DLP solutions through such Exchange, then Exchange has the super user capability to be able to read into those protected contents. And it depends upon if the search product that you are using has integration with our product. So if it does, then the super user capability would be able to allow them to see within that protected content, but I would have to know what vendor specifically that was, and you would need to talk to that vendor to see if they have that capability.
Okay. For the Adobe support currently being on Windows only, what if you decide to implement the bring your own key functionality later after the initial deployment?
So bring your own key is the same functionality as the Microsoft managed key. So all of that is currently done in the background. So the bring your own key functionality, you would have to re-encrypt anything to have it use the new key that you've added, but you can change to bring your own key at any time and continue using it just as you were. All new content will be protected with that new key. Anything that you have previously protected that you would want protected with that key, you would need to re-encrypt in order to make that happen.
Okay, great. Do we have Outlook labeling and encryption creation at this time? And if not, when would the GA be?
So we have Outlook labeling on PC and Mac, but I suspect that the question is for mobile because I didn't show that. We don't currently have that, but that is hopefully coming in the first half of this calendar year. We have that documented online, and we can put that link to that documentation in the chat window. I had that just earlier today, and it is documented on the Office support site. If you search for AIP Office Mobile, you can actually find the timelines for that capability.
Okay, great. For the AIP rules to be enforced, does that require DLP or MCAS?
No. So AIP is separate from DLP and MCAS, but if you want to enforce AIP, for instance, on a SaaS application or SharePoint Online, then you would want to use MCAS to be able to handle that capability. We are looking at adding native capabilities for SharePoint in the future, but today, if you have MCAS, you can actually get that capability directly within those online services, and not just our online services, but also third party.
Okay, great. When will AIP be available for Office Online products?
That is a very good question, and not one that we have currently defined, but as soon as we have more definite timelines on that, we will be blogging about it, because we are definitely working on it currently. We just don't have solidified timelines. We do have a roadmap website publicly that in the AIP Deployment Acceleration Guide, we have a link to that. And you can actually go to our roadmap site and see exactly when those things are planned on being released.
Okay, great. When you label a document, can you include your own custom label logo? So confidential could include like a red logo, for example.
So that is not currently something that we have. We can do ASCII characters. So you technically can add emojis and things of that nature, although that has not been tested. So, please don't do that without thorough testing. But currently the watermarks are text only.
Okay, and don't we have color coding as part of the labeling too? Isn't that something we could?
Yes, of course, you can change the color. I thought you meant an actual like logo or something of that nature.
Yeah, they were asking about both, so.
Okay, gotcha. Yes, you can change the colors of the watermarks and the headers and footers natively within AIP.
Okay. What are some of the major considerations for an enterprise should review before moving to a hybrid AD-RMS coexistence with O365?
So there are lots of considerations when you start looking at a hybrid AD-RMS coexistence. The only supported hybrid AD-RMS coexistence with O365 is hold your own key. And if you search for hold your own key, you can see there is a large chart that talks about the capabilities that you do and do not have when using hold your own key with AD-RMS. We do advise migrating to the cloud for Azure RMS to be able to take better advantage of the new features. But if you do want to stay with ADRMS, the only hybrid capability that you have is to be able to use hold your own key for any ADRMS based labeling. And then we do recommend using bring your own key for Azure RMS at that point for anything that is not your absolute most sensitive data.
All right. Currently, to content scan information already existing in O365 or SharePoint, it requires MCAS. Is that the long-term goal, or will we be able to scan O365 content with AIP without MCAS acting as the conduit?
So we are working on merging DLP solutions and the O365 DLP capabilities. And I believe once we've migrated to SCC, that story is going to become more integrated. It is the goal that we will be integrating much of that functionality, but for advanced functionality with O365 and other online SaaS services, there are definitely going to be advantages to using MCAS. But there will be some of that functionality in O365 DLP natively, yes.
Okay, great. Is WIP for down-level protection at the client level or for local files?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. What is WIP for? Is it for down-level protection at the client level or for local files?
So Windows Information Protection, there's integration with Windows Information Protection and AIP. Windows Information Protection is now aware of AIP sensitivity labels. So if you're in the Security and Compliance Center and you set something to enable essentially the endpoint DLP, I believe is what it's currently labeled as, within those Security and Compliance Center labels, then when a file is downloaded to the PC, WDATP will actually see that as a sensitive file that has that endpoint DLP enabled, and it will mark it as a work file. At that point, it will warn users or block users from being able to add those to unsanctioned applications, like if they try to send it in the Microsoft Mail app, if you're not using that as a sanctioned application or a work application, or if you try to attach it to an email in Gmail, then it will block or warn that. And also, if you copy and paste from one of those documents into a non-work application, it will warn you that what you're doing can be logged, or it can block from doing that altogether.
Okay, great. If someone's just getting started implementing AIP, would you recommend that they start with the classic labels in Azure or go directly to the new labels in SCC?
So that is definitely a good question. It depends upon your timelines. If you are looking to deploy as soon as possible, absolutely use the AIP Classic Blade in the Azure portal, because currently you have the AIP labels or the AIP functionality GA in Windows. And since most of our clients are going to be a large majority Windows clients, you wouldn't want to deploy a preview client to your production 100%, because for testing it's great and all of that. Now, if your deployment timelines are 3 to 4 months out, we should have GA clients for Windows. And then at that point, it may be better for you to just build them directly within Security and Compliance Center and use the unified labeling clients across all the platforms. Now, there are caveats to that. If you want to use Hold Your Own Key is not currently implemented in the Security and Compliance Center. And so if you are using any of the ADRMS and want to use Hold Your Own Key, then you would need to stay with the AIP portal. And there are a few other caveats that you'd want to research to make sure that if you're using any advanced functionalities, that you have that capability within the Security and Compliance Center. But for the most part, if you're having a very basic deployment and you plan on deploying it over the next few months before you get into production, then starting with the Security and Compliance Center is completely fine.
All right, fantastic. Is WIP enabled automatically with AIP, or do you have to enable it separately?
Windows Information Protection is separate, and it does require the Windows E5 license. So that's going to come with your Microsoft 365 E5 or Windows E5 licensing specifically. Oh, I'm sorry. No, WIP is... Okay, sorry. Windows Information Protection can be used by itself with just, I believe, E3. It comes with Intune, essentially. And so that is not enabled with AIP, but for the WDATP and WIP integration, WDATP requires Windows E5 licensing. And so typically, if you want that full picture with the device risk and with the automated WIP protection for AIP labeled content, then you would require the Windows E5, but it does require a separate setup in Intune to set up WIP, and then also in WDATP to integrate that with WIP and AIP. I'm going to be blogging about that at some point in the near future. So please keep up with our AIP blog, and hopefully you should be seeing that in the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Do we support Citrix files, and what can you talk about any other non-Microsoft formats we support? You mentioned the PDFs already.
So PDF is native integration, and we're working with several other vendors to get native integration for the non-Microsoft files. What we have for non-Microsoft files is called generic file protection, or P-file protection. This allows you to validate authentication before a file is able to be opened. But once that file is opened, it's essentially like opening a password-protected zip file. Once the contents is extracted, it is no longer protected. So the best case scenario, if you want specific file formats to be protected natively, so that the application can open it, then you talk to that vendor or you talk to us to find out if we are working with that vendor to help them get native protection.
Great, thank you. Can you speak a little bit to our Linux support? What do we support for Linux and what don't we support?
So the SDK is supported for Linux, but I personally don't know of any applications that are used on Linux.
Okay. All right. What licensing changes are anticipated with the convergence that you mentioned earlier?
So we had a slide here about some of the various licensing changes. Unfortunately, I can't really speak to the licensing changes because I don't know. Those changes are done at a much higher level than me. We deal with the technical aspects and we help customers with the licensing once it is released. And so unfortunately, I don't have any additional information on that.
Okay, thank you. Is our AIP classification scheme proprietary, or is it based on some global standard?
So the AIP classification scheme that we have built and is in all of our previews is one that we developed here at Microsoft. Microsoft spent about 6 to 9 months, developing a classification standard to move us from our previous classification of MBI, LBI, HBI, or low business impact, medium business impact, high business impact, to what you've seen in the demos so far. And that schema we've made available to everyone, but it is not necessarily based upon any governmental standards or ISO standards or anything of that nature. It is something that we have developed. We are working closer with those governmental bodies and standards bodies to talk about how to set those standards up. But when it comes to the labeling, what we typically recommend is it is proprietary. It is something that we developed, and it is something that we recommend because Microsoft has offices in every country in the world. And so we have employees in every country in the world. And so we had to spend a lot of time and effort to ensure that that classification schema is as homogeneous as possible. It is as useful across the entire world as it is possible. So we recommend that people start with what we provide, And all of that is in the deployment and acceleration guide. And from that point, you can modify it and tweak it to better fit your company. But we give you that as a jumping off point so that you can accelerate your journey into AIP.
Great. Can you speak a little bit about the AIP scanner?
Sure, I can speak at length about the AIP scanner. But it would be better if you came to our Discovery webinar where we will be going a deep dive into that. The AIP scanner is used for on-premises scanning of CIFS repositories and SharePoint on-premises document libraries. It allows you to scan and discover all of the different data types that you have in your document libraries and repositories on premises. So you can scan your, hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data and be able to come back and see those nice charts in the AIP portal and be able to actually have visual data that helps to visualize your data risk. And then you can actually use that AIP scanner to go back and protect those documents, or at least classify those documents using the AIP scanner natively. Right. But as I said, we will have a whole lot more information during our discovery and protection panels on the AIP scanner.
Perfect. We'll look forward to that. Where do you learn the basics of what all these pieces are? For someone who's just getting started on this track, trying to really lock down all this data, we tend to be using a lot of acronyms.
So just getting started, I highly advise reading through the AIP Deployment Acceleration Guide. And I know I sound a bit like a broken record, but we spent a lot of time writing that document and breaking it down into the different pillars of information protection. And so it helps you to really get started. It is written at a, like I said, 100 to 200 level to kind of give you the basics of what AIP is, what information protection is, and all the various things that orbit around it. Now, I'm not going to say that it's fully inclusive, and we will be adding things to it and evolving that document, but for now, it will always be in the same location. So as we improve it, it will be, updated in that same aka.ms/AIPDAG, and you will be able to actually see additional things as we add that to it. But we will also put out community posts whenever we update that so that you will know that. But the very first thing that I would recommend anyone who is getting started with AIP do is to read that deployment acceleration guide, because it's going to answer a majority of the questions that you would have right off the bat.
Okay, great. Where would someone find examples of how to protect SharePoint online sites with DLP rules?
So the best way to protect SharePoint online sites is going to be using Microsoft Cloud App Security right now. As far as DLP rules, that's going to fall under the Office 365 DLP category. And we have a lot of great documents on our support website that if you just search for Office 365 DLP and SharePoint, you'll be able to find that. Like I said, that functionality isn't as granular or advanced as the Microsoft Cloud App Security is. And so if you really want to protect your data in an advanced way and get the best benefit possible, we highly advise using Microsoft Cloud App Security and attending the webinars on that.
Great. How does OME using AIP work when we implement this on an Office Pro Plus on a terminal server using shared computer activation? Sorry, pretty specific scenario here. We have implemented this for months and it's not working right now. Can you say something about if it is even supported and should it be expected to work?
So that is a very specific, very complicated scenario that I don't want to mislead you and say that it does or does not work. I would advise, if you're having trouble getting it to work, to open up a case with our support to determine what the actual realities of that is. Because without actually digging into it myself, I can't really tell you whether or not that's A, supported, or B, something that should function properly. So I can tell you that OME is designed to function and it functions at the transport level. So as long as you're going out through Exchange Online as your last hop, you should be able to use OME to send to anybody. Now, if you have anything after Exchange Online, like you have a third-party services that filter your mail after it leaves Exchange Online, then that could break Office 365 message encryption. So that is where I would start with finding out if you're having problems, because if you have something after that last O365 export, then that could be breaking your stuff, as opposed to all the other variables that you threw out there.
And to add also to that question, for any additional, in addition to the standard support channels, you can also post something like that to our community and give a lot of detail about your scenario or any screenshots or anything. So that makes it a lot easier to address a really specific scenario like that. So everyone else, please feel free to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to give another couple of minutes here for questions. We've just got a couple to wrap up, and I will add some links as I'm doing that. Remember, everyone, that the recordings are here. Let me post that link. I got a question about when those will be made available. They're actually available immediately after this is over. The link to this presentation, like moments after I end it, automatically becomes the link to the recording. And I've archived and posted all of those at that short link there, aka.ms AIP recordings. You'll also find links there to the rest of the webinar series if you, for some reason, don't have those, and also the Q&A. We got one more question here. Let me add that. Exchange Online doesn't have to be. Oh, this is more of a comment. Someone's saying that Exchange Online doesn't have to be your last hop, so they're doing it and it seems to work.
Oh, well, that's what I've always been told, and I apologize if I'm misinformed there. So I'm glad to hear that. But again, posting that question either in the security communities or opening a CSS case is going to be the best way to determine the supportability and help you get a resolution.
Great. Is AIP able to work with Teams channel chat?
That is a good question. It is something that is in the roadmap down the line. I don't know exact dates on that. But it is something that we are looking into and working on.
Okay. After convergence with SCC, is there an end-of-life date for AIP when it will be deprecated?
That's not something that we've put out, but it's not something you should have to worry about for quite a while. Because as long as down-level versions of Office are supported, we should have a version of AIP. Now, I can't say that that will always be true. Eventually, we will have an end of life, but we will communicate that widely once that is available. We're not just going to, say, oh, we stopped supporting you today. So there will be plenty of lead time on that.
Okay. We're about out of time here, so I just want to give people some final information. I just posted a link again to our community, aka.ms/security community, where you can always ask any questions like this, and all of us are on there to address them and answer them. Remember that this is only one session in a 6-part series, so we hope you'll join us for the others. You can find the recordings at that link I gave you just a moment ago, aka.ms/AIP recordings, and the rest of the series and the other links to our community. Thank you, Kevin, for a compelling presentation, and thanks to all of you who joined us today and for being part of our community. We hope to see you again next week.
And thank you, Ryan, for having me.